Hi, and welcome to Truth Matters. My name is Lynn, and with this podcast, I'm hoping to shine a light on a range of topics, whether Irish, regional, or global, and whether environmental, cultural, or political. Because the truth matters.
This is the second part in this episode of Truth Matters, Private Gun Ownership, the Gun Safe. In the last episode, in part 1, I looked at the history of guns and how many guns were out there in private ownership, who the gun manufacturers were, and where you can buy them, and whether there were any restrictions to gun ownership. In part 2, I'm looking at who's shooting what. What does this mean in terms of deaths from gun violence? Checking if any guns have been banned and how different groups perceive gun ownership. And is gun ownership strictly a man thing? So, who's shooting what? In our everyday living, we hear about a variety of gun usage and shooting that goes on. Here, I have listed some of them. Toy guns. Lots of different types: pop guns, cap guns, model guns, pellet guns, rifles, muskets, airsoft or BB guns. The list goes on, and many of these are made to look just like the real thing. There has been resistance by toy manufacturers over the decades to regulate toy guns, although now they must have orange tips, and some US states have banned airsoft guns. In 2018, Walmart removed replicas of assault-style rifles from their catalogue. The concern is they get children used to the idea of shooting each other. It's like subliminal advertising. Video games. In 2024, the number of gamers worldwide ranged from 1.5 billion, according to Statista, to 3.3 billion, that's priori data, with China the highest number. Lots, anyway. The goal in many video games is to kill and vanquish as many as possible and be the overall victor. But this can be a trigger for someone who is predisposed to violence. Following on from the 2011 Norway mass shooting, a chain of retail stores in Norway removed several warlike video games from its shelves as a result of the attack and their use as a training tool by the perpetrator. Movies and television programs. Depending on what time you are watching and in which country, studies have shown that over 60% of television programs contain some violence, and about 40% of those contain heavy violence. Plus, 91% of movies on television contain violence, including extreme violence. Recent movies often include not only extreme violence, but also injury detail and lots of swearing. Protection from wild animals, like the shooting of rattlesnakes, bears, or mountain lions, or taking pot shots at gophers or moles because they're playing havoc with the lawn. You'd expect lions, hippos, and crocodiles to be the greatest killers of humans, and therefore the most shot at, but they only kill annually 200, 500, and 1,000 humans, respectively. It's rabid dogs and snakes you need to worry about, with nearly 60,000 and 138,000 each. But the top predators in 2024, according to Science Focus, are humans killing 400,000 other humans and mosquitoes killing 725,000 people annually. And you can't shoot the mosquitoes, however hard you try. Hunting, or the killing for sport, is still very popular. Deer, foxes, rabbits are common in Ireland. Pangolins are the world's most trafficked animal, but the great white hunter Lion, leopard, rhinoceros, elephant, and African buffalo are the prizes, often killed under license, but poaching is rife. Shooting ranges. Most shooting ranges are privately owned by civilians and clubs, catering mostly to recreational shooters. In the US, there were an estimated 8,600 shooting ranges in 2023, according to IBIS World, and the minimum age requirement at a shooting range can vary from 7 to 21 years of age. In Ireland, many restrictions are in place at the 18 shooting ranges, with the necessity to pass a firearms competency course and 2 induction courses. Minimum age of attendance is 14. Personal security and domestic violence. 72% of US gun owners say protection is a major reason they own a gun, which has increased dramatically in the past 2 decades. Women in particular have increased their gun ownership in the past 8 years, citing protection as their main reason for owning a firearm. Popular culture is flaunting the independent, feisty woman who can look after herself, an attitude which is being fanned by the gun manufacturers keen to expand this market. According to a UN report on conflict and violence, the home remains the most dangerous place for women and girls. The Femicide Watch of the Irish Women's Aid counted 85,000 female homicides globally in 2023, 60% carried out by intimate partners or family members. Women bear the brunt of lethal victimization, often tied up with misogynistic beliefs, inequality, and dependency that persist globally, especially in low-income countries. According to research identified in a Los Angeles Times 2023 article, the increase in sales of guns to women for protection has not increased their safety in domestic violence situations, but has made them even more vulnerable to homicide or suicide with access to a gun. Yet, in Ireland, saying you want a gun for self-defense is not considered a valid reason to own a gun, and you will have your application to own a firearm denied. Security personnel or bodyguards are generally armed with handguns, although one I spoke to years back said that heavy shoes crushing the toes of people getting too close were far more effective. Private militias. Militias are unauthorized, armed, private paramilitary groups found all over the world, and they are considered unlawful to form such coordinated groups. It is believed there are presently at least 61 active groups in the US networking together, and many Facebook groups regularly reinvent themselves to keep an online presence, organizing meetups, offering combat training, and recruiting active patriots. Their supposed enemies include drag queens, immigrants, pro-Palestine college students, communists, and members of the US government. Concerns abound about conflict contagion. And did the pardoning of the January 6 rioters, rebranded as patriots, legitimize the use of force in dissent, particularly by these private militias? Suicides. The use of firearms in suicides range from under 10% in Australia to 50% in the United States, where suicides outnumber homicides 2 to 1. The percentage is actually higher in the EU at 75% of firearm deaths, but this is a proportion of a much lower total number. Access to firearms is deemed to increase the number of suicides as gun ownership make suicide an easier reality. Those who purchased a firearm were found to be at high risk for suicide within a week of the purchase. Targeted shootings for political reasons. The latest shooting of Minnesota Democratic lawmakers, with the death of State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband, and critical wounding of State Senator John Hoffman and wife, is targeted political violence. Many other lawmakers were listed on the perpetrator's manifesto, plus Planned Parenthood centers. Despite this recent attack on Democratic lawmakers, the past year has seen increased political attacks on Nancy Pelosi's husband, 2 attempts on the president's life during the election run-up, the burning of Governor Josh Shapiro's home, plus thousands of threats and harassment against judges and lawmakers. Words have consequences, and presently in the strongman countries of the world, there is frequent fanning of the flames of outrage with rhetoric. In an environment where this outrage, built on grievances, whether real or created by misinformation, stokes violence. Violent action has become the norm for some. What makes these politically motivated shootings particularly heinous is that it undermines freedom of speech by making politicians reluctant to air their views for fear of reprisals. This intimidation effectively silences dissent and muzzles this freedom of expression. The UN reports political violence no longer affects only low-income states. In the past 15 years, more than half of the world's population has lived in direct contact or proximity to significant political violence. Mass shootings are incidents involving multiple victims. Although definitions vary, it is generally agreed it is when a shooter kills at least 4 victims and excludes gang killings, domestic violence, or terrorist acts sponsored by an organization. Words like horrifying, devastating, shocking lose their currency when used over and over. Although mass shootings in more remote parts of the world barely make the news unless there is some sensational element that will keep the 24/7 news bulletins offering fearful images, the if it bleeds, it leads mentality. The 2011 Oslo bomb, followed by mass shootings of youth on an island in Norway by far-right anti-Islam extremist Anders Breivik, has been planned for a long time. After fruitless attempts to buy guns legally in Prague, he applied to get a semi-automatic rifle and a Glock pistol legally in Norway because as a hunter, he already owned 2 guns. The pistol proved more difficult to obtain as he had to attend 15 training sessions at the Oslo Pistol Club in order to qualify. His manifesto declared that he honed his shooting skills through a warfare video game and a holographic sight similar to the one he used during the attacks. His indiscriminate shooting on the island killed 69 young people and wounded 66, were accompanied by his cry of, "You will die today, Marxist liberals, members of the elite." He also blamed feminism for the erosion of the fabric of European society. Incarcerated he may be, but Breivik is glorified as a hero by some, with an active fan club writing to him. In October 2017, the lone gunman, Stephen Paddock, carted 5 suitcases of 24 guns and ammunition into his 2 adjoining hotel rooms with the intention to shoot at, kill and wound many of the 22,000 people at a music concert in Las Vegas. All guns and ammunition were legally purchased. He killed 60 and ultimately wounded 867 and traumatized all the other concert goers. Nobody could discern a motive for his attack. Did he just want to die a legend and have his name in lights? In March 2019, there were 2 mass shootings at mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, killing 51 people and injuring 40 more. The first one live streamed on Facebook. Brenton Tarrant, the perpetrator, said in his manifesto, The Great Replacement, they all like to have a manifesto, that he was inspired by Breivik and had some contact with him. The guns he used included 2 lever-action and bolt-action rifles, 2 semi-automatic rifles, a semi-automatic shotgun, and a pump-action shotgun. This attack inspired later attacks in US, Norway, Canada, and beyond on mosques, and reprisal attacks by radicalized Muslims, accelerating the issue through media and social media messaging. Gang killings or terrorist acts. I've grouped these together, but they are both overwhelmingly global in their own right. According to a 2017 United Nations report on global violence, conflict and violence are currently increasing, and I quote, "Political instability engenders organized crime, including targeted attacks against police, women, journalists, and migrants." Many conflicts are now waged between non-state actors, such as political militias, criminal and international terrorist groups. The United Nations Security Council Committee have identified 56 designated terrorist groups, although many are divisions of the same group, like Islamic State, just in different countries. Plus, there is a further list of over 300 groups that have been designated terrorist organizations by individual countries, which are associated with terrorism, street gangs, paramilitaries, and resistance groups. The UN estimated that 19,000 people were killed globally in terrorist attacks in 2017. About 1/3 of news media coverage relates to terrorism. This is much greater, actually, than the percentage of deaths caused by terrorism, which is less than 0.01%. But then terrorism news gathers the views and sells. Organized crime and gang violence vary widely across regions, but the Americas, particularly Central America, have the highest homicide rates, 37% of the global total in a region of only 13% of the world's population. School shootings. The recent school shooting in Graz, Austria, which killed 10, is not unprecedented, but it still sent shockwaves throughout Europe. Researchers maintain that the lower gun availability in Europe is linked with lower numbers of mass shootings compared to the US. The higher the gun availability, the higher the homicide rate globally, said Marika Leem, a professor of violence at Leiden University in the Netherlands. But Austrians are amongst the heaviest armed civilians in the world. School shootings make regular headlines in the US, with 2,400 school shootings since 1966. Admittedly, a relatively small percentage of the 135,000 schools, but still an incredible number. And school children are taught how to hide in case a shooter arrives at the school. And yet there is incredible resistance by the NRA and its members to any regulating of arms purchases in the US. Even the mental health proviso was not universally accepted. The 2012 mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School is one of the most heartbreaking of school shootings, and one that has been tainted by contemptible accusations of it being a false flag operation. In a 10-minute shooting spree, the perpetrator, 20-year-old Adam Lanza, shot and killed 20 children aged 6 to 7 and 6 school staff. The 2 bolt-action rifles and 2 pistols he used had been legally purchased by his mother, whom he also shot and killed. I repeat what I have so often said. Violent language gets you used to the idea of violent action. There is an excess of violent language being used, which is morphing into violent action. According to the FBI, hate crimes have surged, and the contagion is spreading around the world. Have any guns been banned? Following on from the Norwegian mass shooting, semi-automatic rifles were banned in Norway for hunting, but still allowed for sport shooting. After the New Zealand mass shooting, there was an immediate ban on semi-automatic guns and a buyback scheme offered. Australia had already implemented a buyback scheme for semi-automatic and pump-action firearms in 1996. Bump stocks were used in the Las Vegas mass shooting and were banned in December 2018. But the ban was overturned by the US Supreme Court in 2024. So what does this mean in terms of deaths from gun violence? According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, 2023 figures show Singapore has the lowest rate of violent gun deaths, followed by Japan and South Korea. Examples of number of deaths in other countries with proportion to the 100,000 population include Austria, 17 deaths. That's 0.19 per 100,000. Australia, 25, 0.09 per 100,000. Spain, 53, 0.11 per 100,000. Canada, 289, 0.67 per 100,000. Ecuador, 7,108, 39.5 per 100,000. United States, 15,186, 4.42 per 100,000. Mexico, 22,355, 17.2 per 100,000 population. Central America and the Caribbean have the highest violent gun deaths per capita. The EU collectively has about 1,000 homicides and 700 accidental deaths through guns. Homicides by firearms make up 20% of all deaths in the EU, well below the global average of 49%. So how do we perceive gun ownership? When asked the question, how do Europeans feel about gun laws, a Frenchman named Raymond de Vries, who had lived some years in the US, summed up the mood of Europeans. Europeans don't think about gun laws, and we don't think about guns very often either. We accept guns as important tools of the trade needed by licensed hunters, authorized police, and trained soldiers. An overwhelming majority of us think that existing gun laws strike a healthy balance between personal freedom and public safety, he continued. We don't fear guns, we respect them. Our police are trusted to know when to use them and our licensed operators know how to store them safely and when not to use them. Fear does not dictate European gun policy. Freedom from fear does. Verifiably sane and criminal record-free Europeans are free to own and operate firearms for legitimate uses. Non-gun-owning Europeans are free to enjoy life without fear of uncontrolled guns ending their lives or those of loved ones. And he recognised that there were many French people with guns for hunting, despite the extensive requirements in place for obtaining a gun. But there were instances of American families sending festive greetings recently with the gun-toting family gathered around the Christmas tree. Obviously, this was a positive message for them, but I could not imagine Jesus carrying a handgun, let alone an automatic gun, so I find it difficult to justify this as a Christian message. So do we get desensitized due to everyday violence depicted in television, films, videos, news, and on view on the streets in some places? The three major effects of viewing TV violence are children having less empathy to the pain and suffering of others, and they may be more anxious about the world around them, and they may also be more likely to behave in aggressive or harmful ways towards others. Where armed police forms are the norm, this may also lead to the acceptance of guns in the community, and an environment of fear can be created within a law and order society. Ireland is one of 17 countries worldwide, which includes Great Britain, Norway, and New Zealand, where the majority of uniformed police force is unarmed, with a philosophy of policing by consent and lower gun homicide rates than countries with armed police forces. If anyone ever watched Michael Moore's documentary Bowling with Columbine about the 1999 mass school shootings in Columbine, Colorado, one of the items he highlighted was that US society appeared to be propelled by fear compared to its secure feeling Canadian neighbours across the lake in Windsor, Ontario. Gun-related violence must be an everyday occurrence for so many people, but not so much in the developed world. You would think it was an absolutely everyday occurrence on your doorstep if you listened or watched the news, but thankfully, I don't step out of my house fearful that someone may attack me and attack me with a gun. Well, not now, anyway, but that's for a different episode. So, how much machismo is involved in gun ownership? The NRA in the US has approximately 5.5 million members, more than the population of Ireland, with 67 presidents since its inception in 1871, 3 of which have been female, the first being in 1995. Of the 25 NRA board members, 3 are women. Of the 18 officers listed in the National Association of Rifle and Gun Clubs in Ireland, only 1 was a woman, and she was an assistant administrator. The 17 gentlemen were nearly all of mature years. Looking once again at the US, according to a 2022 Gallup report, men are nearly twice as likely as women to own a gun, 43% versus 22%. And the Pew Research Center reveals that white men are especially likely to be gun owners. Nearly half say they own a gun, compared with 24% of both white women and non-white men, and 16% of non-white women. But 62% of women feel gun laws should be made stricter, whereas the figure is only 51% of men. This gender gap in gun law preferences persists despite gun ownership status, as women who own guns are more likely than male gun owners to support stricter gun laws, 40% versus 32%. So there's about a 10% drift there between the sexes. Men like guns, and more women are liking them too. The question we need to ask ourselves is why? Apparently, guns give a sense of control to their owners. Various university and psychological studies say owning a gun has become like a talisman of self-identity, providing both a feeling of power and physical security, keeping you safe, with men branded in promotions as the family protector, and a sense of control over your life, helping to keep chaos at bay. Yet, gun owners perceiving the world as dangerous may be a self-fulfilling prophecy. The reality of gun violence, gun suicides, and accidental deaths is that guns can make everyone less safe and create their own chaos. So I will finish with my mantra. Violent language gets you used to the idea of violent action. So how many violent indicators did you come across today? This is Lynn, signing off with another episode in the Democracy Matters series of Truth Matters. And thank you for listening. Until the next time.